The gavel hit the mahogany bench with the finality of a coffin closing. Judge Thaddeus Ingraham stared down at Muhammad Ali from his elevated position in Houston's federal district court. The June heat pressed against the windows. 60 reporters and 200 spectators waited in absolute silence for the words that would destroy the greatest boxer who ever lived. It was June 20th, 1967, and America was about to witness something far more powerful than any knockout. A moment that would prove true strength isn't about winning fights, it's about winning hearts. Mr. Clay, the judge began, using Ali's birth name deliberately, each syllable a calculated insult. This court finds you guilty of refusing induction into the United States Armed Forces. The room erupted into chaos. Photographers scrambled for position. Reporters shouted questions into the mayhem. But Judge Ingraham raised his hand, and silence fell like a blade cutting through smoke. What happened in the next 12 minutes would haunt both men for the rest of their lives. The old judge was about to deliver maximum punishment to a man who would respond with a question so devastating it would crack open 30 years of buried grief and transform hatred into understanding. Judge Thaddeus Ingraham was not a man who second-guessed his decisions. At 68, he had spent 15 years on the federal bench, known throughout Texas as Iron Thad for his uncompromising interpretation of the law. His silver hair was cropped military short, his posture ramrod straight, and his steel-gray eyes had stared down murderers and mobsters without ever blinking. He was a man who believed in absolutes, right and wrong, duty and desertion, honor and cowardice. He was a Normandy veteran who had earned a Purple Heart and Bronze Star before his 25th birthday, who had watched friends die on foreign beaches. He knew what real courage looked like, and it had nothing to do with boxing gloves or championship belts. But that wasn't what made this case personal. On his office desk sat a photograph. Captain David Ingraham, killed near Da Nang on November 3rd, 1966. His only son, 23 years old. David had volunteered despite his deferment. He believed in service, and now he was buried in Arlington while famous boxers claimed religious exemptions. Now sitting before Judge Ingraham was Muhammad Ali, rich, famous, healthy, the heavyweight champion claiming his religion prevented him from serving while American boys like David died in rice paddies. The hypocrisy burned like acid. The judge's hands gripped the bench until his knuckles went white. Ali sat at the defense table, his face calm and dignified. He wore a dark suit, showing no fear despite facing 5 years in federal prison and the end of his boxing career at 25. That serenity infuriated the judge more than the crime. How dare he look peaceful while David's widow raised their daughter alone? The prosecutor painted Ali as a draft dodger hiding behind religion. The defense argued conscientious objector status. But Judge Ingraham had made his decision before the trial began. This was about justice for every family who buried a son. For David. The evidence is overwhelming, Judge Ingraham continued. You refused lawful orders. You showed contempt for this nation and for young men who answer the call without hesitation. The courtroom fell silent. Ali's supporters looked stricken. You stand before this court as a man of privilege, the judge went on, each word sharp. You've made millions from a country that gave you everything. Yet when asked for service, you refuse. You hide behind religious conversion. Ingram's eyes bored into Ali's. Young men die in Vietnam while you collect championship purses. His voice cracked with barely contained grief. My own son, Captain David Ingraham, was killed in action 7 months ago. He could have claimed deferments. He was in graduate school studying history with his whole life ahead. But he went anyway because he understood that freedom requires sacrifice, that citizenship demands duty. The courtroom electrified. This was no longer just another draft case. A federal judge was prosecuting with his own unbearable pain. Therefore, Judge Ingraham declared, it is the sentence of this court that you serve 5 years in federal prison, the maximum penalty. You will be stripped of your boxing license. Your title will be vacated. You will have time to contemplate whether your conscience was worth destroying your career and dishonoring every American soldier. The gavel thundered. The courtroom exploded. Ali's mother wept. Reporters rushed out to call editors with the news that Muhammad Ali had received maximum sentencing. But Ali didn't move. He didn't protest or show anger. He simply stood slowly and looked directly at Judge Ingram with eyes that held not defiance, but compassion, like he could see through the judicial robes to the grieving father underneath. "Your Honor," Allie said quietly. The courtroom fell silent, stunned that the convicted defendant was addressing the judge after sentencing. His lawyers tried to pull him down, but he gently resisted. "May I say something?" Judge Ingram flushed. "Mr. Clay, you have been sentenced. Anything you say now will make your situation worse." "I understand, Your Honor," Allie replied steadily, "but I need to ask you one question. Just one." The audacity stunned everyone. A convicted felon asking to speak after maximum sentencing was unprecedented. But something in Ali's respectful tone made Judge Ingram pause. "You have 30 seconds, he said coldly. Muhammad Ali took a breath, then asked the three words that would echo in Thaddeus Ingram's mind forever. "What was his name?" The judge blinked. "What?" "Your son, Your Honor. You mentioned him. You said he died serving, that he was brilliant in graduate school. You told us your pain, but you didn't say his name. What was his name?" The question landed like a physical blow. Judge Ingram went pale. His hands trembled. In 216 days since David's death, no one in this courthouse had asked that simple question. They said sorry for your loss and thank you for his service. Hollow phrases, but no one asked his son's actual name. No one wanted to know David as a person. "David," he whispered, his voice cracking for the first time in 15 years on the bench. "David Ingram." Ali nodded with profound respect and placed his hand over his heart, bowing his head slightly. "Thank you, Your Honor. David Ingram. I want to remember that name, to honor him by making him real to me, because he was a real person with dreams and people who loved him. He wasn't just a soldier. He was your son. He was David." Tears streamed down the old judge's face in front of 200 witnesses and cameras. His wall of judicial authority crumbled, revealing just a father drowning in grief. "Your Honor," Ali continued, "I know you think I'm a coward. I understand my decision feels like betrayal of everything David sacrificed. But I need you to know, I'm not refusing because I'm afraid to die. I'm refusing because I'm afraid to kill people who've done nothing to me or my people." Judge Ingram looked genuinely surprised. Ali pressed on. "David went to war believing he protected freedom. I respect that. I honor that. But I can't kill Vietnamese farmers who never enslaved my ancestors, never denied me the right to eat at a lunch counter. My fight is here, in America, for my people's freedom." Different war, Your Honor. Not less important. Just different. "You're comparing civil rights to military service?" "No, sir. I'm saying both require courage. David had courage to fight overseas for what he believed. I need courage to fight here, even when it costs everything. When men I respect call me coward and send me to prison. Different battlefields, sir, but both fights for something bigger than ourselves." The old judge sat back, his worldview trembling. For 7 months, he'd used his grief as a weapon, convinced that punishing Ali would honor David's memory. But Ali hadn't defended himself with legal arguments. He'd simply asked for David's name and reminded Judge Ingram that his son was a person, not a symbol, that honoring David meant remembering who he was, not using his death to justify cruelty toward others. For the first time since that telegram, Judge Ingram saw Ali not as a coward, but as another young man following his conscience at enormous cost. 5 years in prison, career destroyed, the hatred of millions. Ali was sacrificing everything for what he believed, just like David had. "I'm going to appeal this sentence, Your Honor," Ali said calmly. "Not because you're wrong to be angry, but because I have the same right to follow my conscience that David had. We both made difficult choices based on what we believed was right." Judge Ingram closed his eyes. The tears wouldn't stop. When he opened them, the iron certainty was gone, replaced by terrible, beautiful doubt. "This court stands in recess. We reconvene in 2 hours." He disappeared into his chambers, leaving a courtroom of confused journalists, shocked spectators, and one young boxer who had just done something far more difficult than winning any championship. In his private journal, published after his 1989 death, Judge Ingram wrote, "Today I sentenced Ali to 5 years, believing I honored my son's memory. Then Ali asked David's name, showing me I'd been using my son's death as a weapon instead of treasuring his life as a gift. I forgot the most important rule. You must see the human being, not just the crime. When court reconvened, Judge Ingraham looked older but lighter. While the guilty verdict stands, this case involves complex questions of conscience that belong before appellate courts. The defendant will remain free on bail pending appeal. An extraordinary reversal. The case would reach the Supreme Court, which unanimously overturned his conviction in 1971. Ali lost 3.5 years of his prime, but never spent a day in prison. Judge Thaddeus Ingraham retired from the federal bench in 1972, officially citing health reasons. But those who knew him understood the real reason. He could no longer sentence people with absolute certainty. Ali had taught him that conscience, even when differing from his own beliefs, deserved respect rather than punishment. In retirement, Judge Ingraham became an unlikely advocate for veterans' mental health services and conscientious objector rights, arguing that both soldiers and war resistors could act from genuine moral conviction. When reporters asked about his transformation, he would say, "Muhammad Ali taught me that honoring my son meant understanding why David chose to serve his country, not forcing everyone else to make that same choice. True honor means respecting the conscience of others." The two men maintained a quiet correspondence until Ingraham's death. Ali sent handwritten notes to David Ingram's grave every Memorial Day for 22 years. When Ali fought Jerry Quarry in his 1970 comeback, Judge Ingraham sat in the audience with tears streaming down his face, as the champion he once tried to imprison proved that greatness isn't about what you refuse to lose, but what you're willing to sacrifice for your beliefs. When Judge Thaddeus Ingraham died in 1989, Muhammad Ali's statement read, "He taught me that justice isn't about being right. It's about being willing to change your mind when you meet someone else's truth. He sentenced me to prison, but gave me the gift of knowing his son's name." The story became legendary not for legal precedent, but because it proved the most important question sometimes reminds someone of their humanity. Judge Ingraham wanted to punish the champion. Instead, Ali reminded him that David was more than a symbol. He was a person whose name deserved to be spoken with love, not wielded like a weapon. That's the real championship. Not knocking someone down, but helping them stand by seeing their pain and honoring it even when they're trying to destroy you.